Imagine boarding a shimmering first-class cabin on an international flight only to be met with suspicion. Dr. Lena Moreau, a brilliant economist in a simple linen dress, clutches her designer carry-on and prepares for takeoff. But the moment she steps aboard, the flight crew assumes she must be a nanny, not the Harvard-educated leader she is. What happens when deep-seated prejudice collides with raw dignity at 36,000 feet? How far will one woman go to reclaim her rightful place in a world built on assumption? As you settle in for this journey, you'll witness microaggressions igniting a corporate revolution, a leak that threatens to destroy an airline, and the fierce choices Dr. Maro must make to save a company and her marriage. Will justice be swift enough to heal old wounds? Can systemic change survive a single act of sabotage? Strap in and join us for a story of power, integrity, and the courage it takes to challenge the status quo. If you're ready to confront bias, demand respect, and celebrate resilience, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and subscribe now to embark on Dr. Moreau's unforgettable flight. The first-class cabin of Orion Air Flight 918 was quiet, except for the soft clink of glassware and the rustle of luxury newspapers being folded just so. The overhead lights glowed a muted gold. The scent of citrus polish and bergamot-scented hand towels hovered in the air. Dr. Lena Moreau stood at the front of the aisle, boarding pass in hand, her carry-on tucked neatly under one arm. She wore a pressed navy shirt dress, linen blend, and low-heeled flats. No logo, no fuss. Her hair was in a short, natural crop that framed her face. Minimal makeup, pearl studs. Everything about her said calm competence, but not, it seemed, to the woman standing in front of her. "Ma'am," the flight attendant said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "This section is reserved for first-class passengers. Economy boarding is still 20 minutes away." Lena blinked, polite but firm. "I know. I'm in 1C. She extended the boarding pass. The woman her name tag read Janelle glanced at it with practiced skepticism. Her expression didn't change, not even a flicker. "Did you win an upgrade or something?" she asked, still not stepping aside. Lena kept her tone even. "No, I purchased my ticket." A pause. That pause. Long enough for Lena to register the subtle shift in body language. Nearby. A white man in a beige travel blazer looked up from his iPad. Another woman, flipping through a fashion magazine, glanced over the rim of her glasses. Janelle exhaled through her nose. "Of course. It's just that we've had misunderstandings before." Behind her, a male attendant joined them. He was tall, with gleaming teeth and an expensive haircut. His tag read Troy. He offered a practiced grin, one Lena had seen before in boardrooms, airports, even academic conferences, the grin of someone trying to play both sides of an insult. "Is there an issue?" "Janelle," he asked. "She's in 1C, Janelle said, holding out Lena's boarding pass like it was a suspicious item at security. "I think there's been a system error." Troy scanned the pass, then glanced back at Lena with the same smile. "Dr. Moreau, is it?" "Yes. And what's your final destination today?" Lena's eyes narrowed slightly. "Zurich, via JFK." Troy nodded, then tapped at a tablet in his hand. "Strange. We're showing 1C already checked in by another guest." Lena said nothing at first. She simply looked between them, weighing whether to challenge or disengage. It wasn't the first time something like this had happened. It was, in fact, remarkably consistent at hotels, in lounges, even in university conferences. But what stung more was not the error, but the implication behind it. "I checked in 3 hours ago," Lena said calmly. Through the app. I selected 1C specifically. Technology isn't always reliable, Janelle replied. Tone sugar-coated but sharp. Sometimes the system doesn't recognize certain inputs. Lena heard it, clear as day, inputs, a euphemism for black. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and took a quiet breath. And what would you like me to do, given that I've paid full fare and have a confirmed seat? Troy smiled wider, still playing helpful. We'll just have to sort it out. There's a great seat in Economy Plus we can offer for now, until the gate agent can clarify. Near the lavatory, Janelle added without irony. Lots of extra space there. Lena didn't blink. That won't be necessary. Both attendants stiffened slightly. Troy's tablet buzzed. He looked down, then up, and his grin faltered. Janelle, he began. Behind them, a new voice spoke. Calm, authoritative, and unmistakably clear. Is there a problem with my wife's boarding process? Heads turned. Caleb Maro, CEO of Orion Air, stood at the cabin entrance. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed back, and his gray travel suit fit like it had been sculpted on him. Despite the soft tone, his presence altered the entire atmosphere of the cabin. Janelle's face turned a shade paler. Mr. Moreau, she stammered. We weren't expecting you on this flight, I can tell, Caleb said coolly, stepping forward. Because if you had been, I imagine you might have treated my wife with the basic respect due to any first-class passenger, or any passenger at all. Janelle glanced down. Troy fidgeted beside her. Lena Moreau, Caleb continued. Harvard Ph.D., global finance expert, director at the World Development Council. Also my wife, and one of the most reasonable people I know until you give her a reason not to be. Silence. Absolute. Lena stepped forward, her voice steady. It's fine. Caleb. It's not, he said. Eyes still locked on the crew. Troy coughed. There was a technical mix-up, but it's being resolved. Resolved how Caleb asked. I believe I'll take my assigned seat now, Lena said quietly, bypassing them and walking to 1C. Neither Janelle nor Troy moved to help her with her bag. She didn't ask. As Lena settled into her seat, she noticed how quiet the cabin had become. Passengers were now pretending not to listen, but their eyes lingered longer than politeness allowed. Caleb sat beside her, still watching the crew with the calm of a man not yet finished speaking. You'll both report to HR as soon as we land, he said, tone low but firm. And I'd suggest spending the rest of this flight thinking carefully about how you interact with people you don't yet understand. He didn't wait for a reply. The attendants retreated, faces red and movements awkward. Lena stared out the window as the plane taxied away from the gate. Her reflection stared back, a woman used to being questioned in spaces she had long since earned the right to occupy. She felt Caleb reach for her hand. I'm sorry, he said. I know, she whispered. Outside. The plane lifted into the clouds, but Lena felt the same weight on her chest she always did in moments like this, the weight of being reminded that no matter how far she had come, someone would always think she didn't belong. And she was getting tired of pretending it didn't matter. Lena sat in seat 1C, hands folded neatly in her lap. The soft hum of the aircraft filled the cabin. The pre-departure ritual continued around her. Champagne was being poured into tall, narrow flutes. Perfume mist danced above cashmere scarves. But Lena's mind was still sitting back at the boarding door, where moments ago her dignity had been challenged and then salvaged in front of strangers. She could feel it, everyone pretending not to watch her, The couple across the aisle leaned into each other, whispering just under the sound of the engines. The man in 2A was peering at his newspaper, but he hadn't turned a page in over 5 minutes. Lena had lived long enough to recognize the performance of politeness, the subtle curiosity that accompanied every public moment in her life. She had long ago accepted that for some people, her very existence in certain spaces felt like a disruption. Beside her, Caleb remained still. He hadn't spoken since his firm reprimand to the crew. His fingers rested on the armrest, close to hers but not quite touching. She knew him well enough to feel the tension radiating from him. Embarrassment, anger, guilt. She suspected all three were warring beneath his composed surface. She looked out the window again. "I should have said something sooner," Caleb said finally, his voice low. "You did," Lena replied without looking at him. "No, I mean before. Janelle, Troy, the way they looked at you. I saw it the moment you stepped on board. I just waited." Lena turned to him. "Because you didn't want to make a scene." He exhaled. "No, because I was hoping they'd get it right on their own, that I wouldn't need to step in." There was a pause between them, full of all the times he had chosen silence in small moments like this. The waiter who addressed him first at a restaurant, even when the reservation had been in her name. The board member who assumed she was his assistant at a gala. The cab driver who asked Caleb where she needed to go. "I wasn't going to make a scene either," Lena said quietly. "Until they pushed." Caleb looked over at her, his gaze softening. "You shouldn't have to push." She gave a faint smile, but there was no humor in it. "You're right. I shouldn't. But that's the thing about being me in places like this. I have to decide every single time whether to fight or let it pass." The seatbelt sign dinged on. The plane began to taxi. Troy returned down the aisle, avoiding their row. Janelle trailed behind him, her posture stiffer than before. Lena could see the shame in the angle of their shoulders, the rush in their steps. But it wasn't clear if it came from genuine realization or the fear of consequences. She didn't need them to apologize, though not yet. Apologies meant very little when they were only offered after exposure. The plane picked up speed. Lena leaned back as the aircraft lifted off the runway. She closed her eyes. Her heart wasn't racing anymore, but it hadn't slowed either. Above the clouds, the sky darkened into a soft velvet. Night flights always made her reflective, suspended between destinations, between who she was, where she came from, and who she had to be where she was going. A soft chime sounded, and the seatbelt sign switched off. Caleb opened his laptop. Typical. She watched as he checked emails, eyes scanning quickly, fingers moving with the precision of someone accustomed to steering multi-million-dollar decisions at 36,000 feet. Lena sipped her water. Her throat still felt tight. "I know what you're going to say," Caleb said suddenly, not looking up. "What's that?" "That this isn't about me. That the moment at the gate wasn't about my job or my presence. That it was about you and what it means to be you in this world." He looked over now. "And you'd be right." Lena tilted her head. "Then why do I feel like I still have to carry the weight of it, even with you beside me, even when everyone else now knows who I am?" Caleb's mouth opened, then closed. He set the laptop aside. "I don't have a good answer for that," he admitted. Lena nodded, appreciating the honesty. A few minutes later, Janelle approached the aisle with a tray. Her expression was carefully neutral, the kind of expression that tried to erase what had come before. "Dr. Moreau," she said, addressing Lena directly now. "We'll be serving dinner shortly. Would you prefer the grilled salmon or the mushroom risotto?" "The risotto, thank you. And for you, Mr. Moreau." "The same," Caleb replied. Janelle made a small note and lingered for a moment longer. "Dr. Moreau," she said again, voice quieter. "I want to apologize for earlier. I made some assumptions. That was wrong." Lena met her eyes. They were not defensive, not hardened, but they weren't entirely open either. "Thank you," Lena said simply. That was all. No forgiveness, no overcompensating, just acknowledgement, which was, perhaps, a start. After Janelle moved on, Caleb leaned in. "That was something." "She's covering herself," Lena replied. "It's not accountability, not yet. You always know the difference." "I've had practice. Dinner arrived. It was plated beautifully, in that airline way of trying to replicate fine dining at altitude." Lena stirred the risotto slowly, but her appetite had not returned. Still, she took a few polite bites, enough to avoid further scrutiny. "I should have told you earlier," Caleb said after a long pause, "that I added your name to the diversity advisory team. I didn't want to put more on your plate, but with everything happening at headquarters, your voice—" "No, you didn't ask me," Lena interrupted gently. Caleb hesitated. "I thought it would be an easy yes." Lena turned to him fully now, her voice still calm but sharper. "Easy for who? For you to check a box. For me to fix something that's broken from the inside." Caleb looked away. His jaw tightened. "That's not what I meant. Maybe not. But that's how it feels." The silence between them stretched. Not hostile, but heavy. Finally, Caleb spoke again. "I'm sorry. I'll remove your name if you want. I should have talked to you first." Lena nodded slowly. "Thank you, but leave it. I'll decide if I want to engage." Caleb nodded too. "Okay." She leaned back in her seat and looked out the window again. The stars were faint tonight, distant in the reflection. She saw her own face, calm but restless. She had fought so hard for a seat in rooms where she was still considered invisible. And now, even when she sat in the front row of a plane, owned by the company her husband led, her presence still read as an error to some, a glitch in the system. She smiled bitterly to herself. Even the system had a face, and it didn't look like hers. The air in the cabin had warmed slightly, not from temperature, but tension. It lingered in the corridors between the seats, invisible but unmistakable. Lena felt it most in the way Troy avoided eye contact and in the subtle hush that fell whenever she passed through the aisle to stretch her legs. She was used to the quiet after a storm. What unsettled her was how familiar it all felt. After dinner, the lights dimmed and the attendants began clearing trays. Janelle moved with mechanical grace. She was quieter now, more careful. Lena noticed that she spoke to each passenger in the same tone, but none received the slightly higher, extra-friendly voice they'd used with the older white couples earlier. The performance had dialed back. Caleb had fallen asleep. His head rested lightly against the window, his breathing deep and slow. Even in sleep, his body posture exuded authority. Lena envied the way he could slip out of tension so quickly. She rarely got that luxury. Her body remembered too much. Her nerves, trained by decades of coded glances and loaded silences, didn't let her rest that easily. She reached into her bag for her e-reader, but her fingers brushed past it and found the small leather notebook she carried everywhere. Inside were notes on her IMF proposal, a list of calls she still had to return, and a half-written outline for an op-ed she'd considered publishing months ago one about the myth of inclusion in elite spaces. She flipped past it. Now wasn't the time. Another chime. Lena looked up. Troy was walking down the aisle again, tapping lightly on a tablet. He stopped by seat 3A, exchanged a few words with a passenger, then turned and came toward her. She tucked the notebook away slowly, her senses sharpening. He stopped at her row, cleared his throat, and gave a sheepish smile. "Dr. Moreau, I hate to bother you again, but there seems to be another issue with the seating system." Lena stared at him. "We just got a ping from our central log. Apparently, your seat 1C was manually changed after check-in. There's a note here that says it was reassigned because of a crew accommodation need." "Crew accommodation," Lena repeated, meaning Troy shifted uncomfortably. "One of the pilots requested a rest seat in first class. And, well, it looks like the system bumped the latest check-in in that zone to economy." She let that settle in for a moment. "So you're saying someone moved me out of my seat," she said slowly, "even though I had already checked in, and reassigned it to someone else?" "Yes, but it was automated." "Troy," she said, her voice calm but deliberate, "there's no such thing as an automated microaggression." He opened his mouth, but no words came. Lena leaned forward slightly. "I have a PhD in systems optimization. I've written white papers on algorithmic bias. I know when a system is programmed to default against certain profiles. So please, don't tell me it was automated unless you're ready to show me the code." Troy looked genuinely unsettled now. "I'll check with the purser," he said quickly. "We'll make sure everything is fine from here." She gave a single nod, then watched him walk back up the aisle with stiff legs. The moment he passed into the galley, Lena stood and walked down the aisle behind him. She needed to move. She needed air. The curtain dividing first class from business brushed against her shoulder. She paused there, thinking about how many of these curtains she'd had to stand behind in her life. Velvet boundaries that weren't about price, but about perception. A woman in 4D looked up as Lena passed. Their eyes met for a moment. The woman smiled tightly. Lena nodded back, but didn't stop. Near the galley, she heard hushed voices. "I didn't authorize it," Janelle was saying. "It must have been entered by someone on the ground." Troy sighed. "Doesn't matter now. She knows. And she's not just some random exec's wife. She's sharp. She's watching everything. She's watching because we gave her a reason to." "You gave her a reason," Troy said, voice sharper than before. "You're the one who flagged her as a possible misboard." Lena stepped back before they saw her. She returned slowly to her seat, her face neutral, but inside, a quiet anger curled beneath her ribs. It was always someone else's fault. The system, the ground crew, a glitch, a misunderstanding. Never their bias, never the weight of their assumptions. Caleb stirred as she sat down. He rubbed his eyes, confused by the lights, then looked at her. "You okay?" Lena hesitated, then nodded. "Just needed a walk. You didn't eat much earlier." "I wasn't hungry." He sat up straighter, sensing the shift in her tone. "Did something else happen?" She considered deflecting, but then she thought of all the times she had done that before. "Apparently," she said, "I was manually moved out of my seat by the system to accommodate a crew member." What Caleb's voice rose slightly. She filled him in. He didn't speak for several seconds. Then he stood up, still groggy but alert, and headed toward the galley without a word. Lena leaned her head back and closed her eyes. She imagined the conversation playing out behind the curtain. She imagined Janelle's nervous voice, Troy's faux charm melting under scrutiny. She didn't want an apology. She wanted them to sit in the discomfort they had created. Caleb returned a few minutes later. "They're scrambling," he said. "HR will be informed the moment we land. I'm also filing a report." Lena looked at him. "And what will that do?" Caleb frowned. "It holds them accountable, or it teaches them to be more careful next time. More covert, less obvious." He didn't respond, because he didn't know, because she was right. "You know," Lena said softly, "I've spent my entire adult life being underestimated by people who don't even realize they're doing it, and every time I have to decide whether to rise above or push back. Every time. It takes energy, quiet energy, exhausting energy." Caleb reached for her hand again. She let him take it. "I'm here now," he said. "I know. But I was alone before you showed up. That's the part that matters." She didn't mean it as a jab, but the truth had edges. Caleb squeezed her hand gently. "They'll answer for this." Lena sighed. "They already have." The rest of the flight passed without further incident, but not without further wait. When they landed, Lena walked ahead. Caleb followed, catching glimpses of crew exchanging whispers as they disembarked. Passengers looked at her with new curiosity. Some, she could tell, had heard, maybe from murmurs down the row, maybe from their own observations. She kept her posture even, her expression unreadable. Outside the gate, a young black woman in a navy suit stood holding a tablet. When she saw Lena, she stepped forward. "Dr. Moreau, I'm with guest services. Mr. Moreau arranged a car. Right this way." Lena nodded and followed. Caleb caught up beside her. Neither spoke until they were seated in the back of a sleek black town car. The driver pulled away from the curb smoothly. Lena looked out the window at the terminal fading behind them. "Do you ever think," she asked quietly, "that the real error isn't in the system, but in the people who write it?" Caleb glanced at her. "Yes," he said, "but systems can be rewritten." Lena didn't answer. Not yet. She wasn't sure whether she believed him. Lena sat back as the overhead reading lights clicked off. The cabin lights dimmed further, leaving only a soft glow over each seat. Outside the window, cloud cover stretched endlessly. The steady drone of the engines was almost hypnotic. She wanted to let herself slip into that calm embrace, but her mind refused to still. A low chime sounded, and the flight attendant call button of seat 1B lit up. Lena glanced to her right. That was Caleb's seat, but he was nowhere to be seen. She frowned, then realized the sound had come from the cabin intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen," the purser's voice filled the cabin. It was Janelle Ricks's voice, but softer, more official. "We have a special announcement for you." Passengers exchanged glances. Phones flickered to life as some reached for them. Lena's heart rate ticked up. "We are honored to have our CEO, Mr. Caleb Moreau, and his wife, Dr. Lena Moreau, on board tonight." Janelle paused. "We apologize for the earlier confusion and any discomfort it may have caused. We are committed to ensuring that all our guests receive the respect and care they deserve. Thank you for flying with Orion Air." A ripple of polite applause rose. Lena felt heat rush to her cheeks. She looked at Caleb, who stood at the front of the cabin, his posture relaxed, but his gaze alert. He offered her a small, reassuring smile. She rose from 1C and joined him at the aisle. A few heads turned. The couple in 2A sat up straighter. The man in the beige travel blazer gave a subtle nod. It was as if the single announcement had rewritten everyone's script. Caleb clasped Lena's hand. He nodded at Janelle, who was hovering uncertainly near the galley entrance, eyes still cast down. Lena lifted her chin and met Janelle's gaze. They stood for a long moment, the power dynamic crystal clear. Janelle swallowed, then said, "Dr. Moreau, Mr. Moreau, we will be serving dessert shortly. If there is anything else you need, please let us know." Lena inclined her head, her voice firm. "Thank you." As the crew moved on, Caleb guided her back to their seats. He sat, and she slid in beside him. The gentle contact, a lifeline. "It didn't have to be like that," he said quietly. Lena exhaled. "It never does." He reached out, brushing a curl away from her temple. "You deserve better." She gave a small, wry smile. "I deserve better everywhere, not just on this flight." Caleb leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "You do." The cabin settled again into a quieter rhythm. Dessert plates appeared, a petite chocolate torte and fresh berries in delicate porcelain bowls. Lena took a bite, savoring the richness, then put her fork down. "I'm tired of being the exception," she said softly. "The one who has to prove herself. The one they think they can displace, ignore, question." Caleb nodded. "They saw you tonight, and they know." She shook her head. "They know I'm the CEO's wife. They still don't know me." He hesitated. "They saw your name tag, your credentials on the intercom." "Credentials don't change perceptions," she said, tone flat. He pursed his lips. "Should I go through security groundside and speak to them before we land?" She regarded him. "No." He blinked. "I thought. Thinking you can fix this by fire, and brimstone is what got us here," Lena said gently. "I don't want a scene. I want a system that doesn't let this happen in the first place." Caleb leaned forward. "I'm working on that. At headquarters, we're drafting new guidelines, retraining, accountability measures." She held his gaze. Words on paper, until they're not. He reached for her hand. "I promise, this won't be swept under the rug." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to trust that change would come. But she knew how word could curl into empty promises when the next crisis emerged. The intercom chimed again. Leonid, one of the pilots, spoke this time. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We will begin our descent shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelts." Lena slid back in. Caleb followed suit. Outside, the wingtip dipped through a thin veil of cloud. The city lights of Zurich winked below. She closed her eyes, letting the view imprint itself on her mind. A patchwork of yellow-orange and white lights sprawled across the earth, tiny constellations pretending to be stars. In her lap, her phone buzzed. She opened it. A news alert from a business blog CEO's wife profiled on Orion Air Flight sparks outcry. She tapped to read. Comments already circulated. Praise for standing up, criticism of the crew, calls for boycott and petitions for policy change. Caleb glanced at her screen, his brow knit. "We're trending." Lena scrolled. A wave of fatigue washed over her. She turned the phone face down. "Enough," she said. Caleb's hand squeezed hers. "Okay." The seatbelt sign dinged on. Their descent quickened. The cabin lights brightened. A flight attendant moved swiftly down the aisle, checking belts and trays. Lena caught Troy's eye as he passed. He nodded quickly and looked away. No apology, no acknowledgement, just a glance laced with something like regret. She did not respond. She did not look away either. She held his gaze long enough that he felt compelled to turn his head. Lena sighed inwardly. She was tired of being the focus. She was tired of the story. She was tired of fighting on a flight. She was tired of carrying every slight. But she would not look away. As the runway lights came into view, she straightened. She checked her bag. She braced for landing. The plane touched down with a gentle bump. Applause rose from seats that once held silent judgment, a performance of gratitude and approval. Lena watched through the window as the plane slowed along the tarmac. She felt Caleb's arm around her shoulders. "Ready?" he asked. She swallowed, then nodded. "Let's go home," she said. She rose first, gathering her belongings. The cabin crew stood back, letting her pass. She kept her head high. As they reached the door, Janelle stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "Dr. Moreau, Mr. Moreau, on behalf of Orion Air, I sincerely apologize for our treatment. We are reviewing everything to ensure this never happens again." Lena paused. She felt the weight of her own power in that moment, the power to accept or to demand more. She met Janelle's gaze steadily. "I appreciate the apology," she said, "but respect is not a one-time gesture. It must be earned and maintained." Janelle nodded, swallowing. "Thank you," she whispered. The door opened. Night air rushed in, cool and fragrant. Lena stepped onto the jet bridge. Caleb followed. Before leaving, Lena paused, then turned. "Janelle," she said, "I look forward to seeing real change." Janelle nodded again. Then Lena walked away. She knew the flight was over, but the journey was just beginning. Lena stepped off the jet bridge into the arrival lounge. The cool air whispered promises of normalcy and routine. She closed her eyes for a moment and let the airport's low hum wash over her. Beneath her calm exterior, a storm raged. Every look, every whispered conversation on the plane had landed like a pebble in her chest. She had faced microaggressions before, but this felt different. This time she had fought back. This time there was no ignoring the echoes of prejudice that followed her even into the sanctuary of first class. Caleb walked beside her, suitcase gliding behind him. His presence was comforting, but it also reminded her of the stark imbalance they navigated daily. He commanded boardrooms and global expansions. She negotiated research grants in ivory towers. But here on the ground, she carried the weight of his world's expectations and her own. They reached the curb. A sleek black car waited. The driver opened the door for them with a nod. Lena paused, turned, and surveyed the terminal. A group of travelers passed by, oblivious to the quiet revolution that had unfolded above. She wondered how many of them believed that flying first class was an entitlement or a ticket to respect. She had learned the hard way that respect was never automatic. Inside the car, Caleb closed the door and glanced at her. "Are you all right?" She nodded. "I will be." He hesitated, then leaned forward to kiss her temple. "I'm proud of you." She forced a smile. "Thank you." The car moved off. They rode in silence for a while. Outside the window, the city lights slid past, momentary beacons in the night. Lena watched them reflect on her skin. She felt the familiar tug of doubt. Was she pushing too hard? Was she demanding too much? Would her fight to be seen cost her the very thing she loved? She closed her eyes and let her mind drift back to the cabin. The way Janelle's apology had fallen flat, the way Troy's gaze had held apology and shame and yet stopped short of true acknowledgement. She had accepted their apology because it was necessary, but in her heart she knew that words alone could not dismantle the architecture of bias. That required sustained courage over time. The driver took a turn onto a quieter street. They drove past the glass facade of the Orion Air headquarters. Its windows glinted with the promise of power and prestige. Lena's stomach knotted. She knew that as soon as she walked through those doors, the momentum from the flight would collide with the inertia of corporate bureaucracy. The car stopped outside their residence, a low brick building in a leafy neighborhood. They paid the driver and climbed out. Lena took a deep breath and stepped toward the front door. Inside, a hush greeted them. It was late. The soft glow from the lamps cast long shadows across the living room. Family photos lined the walls. There was one of Lena and Caleb on their wedding day, another of them at a gala. Bright smiles and perfect posture. These images felt frozen in a gentler time. Caleb set his suitcase by the door. "Go ahead and change," he said. "I need to wrap up a call." She nodded and retreated upstairs. In their bedroom, she unpinned her pearl studs and placed them on the dresser. She unlaced her flats and pulled off her dress. She stood for a moment in her slip, muscles still taut. She walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The night felt heavy. It pressed against her skin like water. She reached for the bedside lamp and switched it on. Light spilled across the walls. She sat on the edge of the bed and pulled her knees to her chest. Her mind spun through the conversations she needed to have. At work, with HR, with the diversity team. There was momentum now. People were paying attention, but attention could evaporate faster than heat on glass. She needed to channel the energy into something concrete. Policies, training, accountability metrics. She wanted to overhaul the onboarding process so the first thing every employee encountered was a commitment to respect. She wanted data dashboards that tracked incidents and responses. She wanted a culture where the default assumption was inclusion, not exclusion. She sighed and lay back, staring at the ceiling. Sleep would not come yet. Her thoughts drifted to Tessa, her best friend, the civil rights lawyer who had marched for justice since childhood. Tessa would understand. She would remind her that she was not alone in this fight. But Lena hesitated. She had leaned on Tessa a lot lately. She was grateful, but she worried that her own burdens were weighing her friend down. She closed her eyes and pictured Tessa's face, fierce eyes and quick smile, always ready to argue until her voice was hoarse, her warmth undercut by an edge of relentless truth. Lena needed that edge right now. She needed to remember why she stepped onto that plane in the first place. She rose, walked over to her desk, and opened the drawer. A stack of handwritten notes stared back. Meeting agendas, policy drafts, a rough outline for an internal memo titled Reclaiming First Class. That was where it began, at the cabin door. But it would not end there. The cabin was a microcosm, a place where bias touched each passenger with gentle cruelty. Lena picked up a pen and began to write. She outlined the first steps her team would take to collect data on seating incidents, interview crew members in anonymous focus groups, design empathy workshops led by experts in systemic bias, integrate accountability checkpoints into performance reviews. She paused and stared at the list. It felt like a small step, but every revolution started with a single declaration of intent. A soft knock at the door. Caleb entered, dressed now in casual slacks and a button-down shirt. His hair was mussed. His eyes were clouded with fatigue and concern. "You're still awake," he said gently. She covered the page. "I needed to get this down." He sat on the bed beside her. "I read your memo." She looked at him. "You did?" He nodded. "It's good, detailed, actionable." She exhaled. I don't want this to be another paper exercise. I want results. He placed a hand on her arm. And you will get them. She studied his face. You believe that he paused. Yes, because I believe in you. Her throat tightened. She didn't know which she cherished more, the promise of change or the faith he placed in her. He leaned in and kissed her forehead. Get some rest. She nodded and lay back. The weight of the day pressed down, but beneath it was a glimmer of purpose. Tomorrow she would convene the HR team. She would call Tessa. She would push for that first data meeting. Sleep found her then, slowly, as if she had to earn it. Her last thought before darkness took her was of the cabin lights dimming and a single announcement echoing across the seats. A declaration of respect so simple it changed everything for a moment. She dreamed of first-class cabins filled with people who simply understood. And she woke with the determination to make that dream real. Lena stepped out of the car and inhaled the crisp morning air. The Orion Air headquarters rose before her like a shard of glass catching the sunrise. It was Monday, and the lobby was already buzzing. Employees swiped badges at turnstiles. Coffee machines hissed. The soft hum of conversations about flight delays and new routes filled the atrium. She straightened her blazer and walked forward. Security recognized her immediately and let her pass with a nod. In the elevator, she rode up to the executive level without touching a button. The doors opened onto a polished hallway lined with glass offices. She remembered when that hallway had felt like the pinnacle of every ambition she ever had. Now each step brought a familiar knot of tension. Nathan Clay, the HR director, was waiting outside the conference room. He offered a tentative smile. His dark suit fit him perfectly. His hair was neatly parted. He looked like someone who believed in process above all else. Dr. Maro, he said. Good morning. We're ready for the meeting. Thank you, Lena replied. She tried to keep her voice warm. How many will attend? 15. Flight crew, ground operations, legal counsel, even a few consultants from the diversity team. She nodded. That was good. Broad participation would help. It would build empathy. It would create accountability. They entered the room. A long table stretched nearly the entire length. Differences of rank were erased by the circle of chairs. Nathan handed her a stack of folders. I've compiled seating incident reports from the last 6 months, he said, including anonymous statements. Lena took them gratefully. She sat at the head of the table. She opened the first folder and glanced at the summary page. There had been 30 recorded seating disputes. 28 involved passengers of color. 17 involved women traveling alone. None had resulted in formal disciplinary action. Her stomach clenched at the numbers. She inhaled and exhaled. It was one thing to know bias existed. It was another to see it quantified in black and white. Nathan took a seat to her left. Janelle and Troy sat to her right. Both avoided eye contact. Around the table sat pilots, marketing directors, cabin crew supervisors, and a pair of junior consultants from the inclusion office. Lena cleared her throat softly. Thank you all for coming. I know this may feel uncomfortable, but discomfort is part of growth. She paused and let that sink in. Conversations about bias required courage. They required vulnerability. We are here because the incident on Flight 918 was not unique. It was symptomatic of patterns we have tolerated. Today we begin changing that. She looked at Janelle, then at Troy. I want to hear your perspectives. I want to understand what led to the decisions at the gate. Let's start there. Janelle drew a breath. Her cheeks were pale. She glanced at Troy, who gestured for her to go ahead. I'm sorry. she began, her voice wavering. "I was following protocol. We're trained to verify boarding passes. But I saw the name Maro and assumed you were traveling on a family upgrade, or as a +1. I didn't connect that you were an individual with credentials." Lena nodded slowly. Assumptions cost more than they save. They cost dignity. They cost trust. Janelle swallowed. "I understand." Troy spoke next. "I felt bad the moment I realized, but I didn't speak up. I thought Janelle had it handled." Silence. Lena acknowledged their honesty. "What about the reassigning of your seat to a crew rest seat?" Who approved that a middle-aged man in a pilot's uniform shifted uncomfortably. "It was submitted by crew scheduling," he said. "I didn't realize it would overlap with an existing seat assignment. There was no check in place." Lena made a note. "We'll put checks in place, mandatory cross-reference before any seat change." She paused. "Now let's talk about empathy. I'm giving you a scenario. Imagine your mother, your sister, traveling alone in that cabin. How would you want her treated?" The room fell silent. Eyes darted. No one spoke. Lena could feel the weight of their silence. "Let's go around," she said softly. "I want each of you to share what you would expect." One by one. They spoke. The marketing director said he would want clear communication. A pilot said he expected politeness and professionalism. A junior consultant said she would want genuine apology and immediate corrective action. When they finished, Lena nodded. "That is what we owe every passenger. Without exception, no matter their name, no matter their skin, no matter their connection to this company." She paused. "Moving forward, we will implement these measures." She outlined her plan. A retraining module on unconscious bias. A new protocol requiring visible identification of first-class passengers beyond their boarding passes. Regular crew rotations so no one props assumptions on familiar faces. A monthly data review to track incidents and outcomes. Nathan added details about how performance reviews would include empathy metrics. The diversity consultants offered to co-design workshops that used real passenger stories. Janelle and Troy listened intently, taking notes. After 90 minutes, Lena wrapped up. "Thank you for your participation and honesty. I know this is hard, but I promise you, it's worth it. Our future depends on how well we treat people at moments that matter." Applause echoed softly, not polite, but genuine. As the room emptied, Janelle lingered. She approached Lena, eyes downcast. "Dr. Moreau, I want to thank you. I realize now how wrong I was. I hope I can prove myself worthy of the trust you're putting in us." Lena offered a small smile. "Thank you, Janelle. That is all I'm asking." Troy nodded in agreement and followed Janelle out. Nathan gathered the folders. "Next step is roll out. I'll coordinate with IT for the system checks and schedule the first training." Lena stood, stretching her shoulders. "Let's do it this week. The sooner we act, the sooner we rebuild trust." Nathan checked his watch. "Consider it underway." She turned and walked toward the executive suites. As she passed the glass walls, she caught sight of herself in the reflection. A woman who had endured bias and was now rewriting the rules. She felt the familiar mixture of pride and exhaustion. Her phone buzzed. A text from Eric Liu, the IMF recruiter. It read simply, "Final interview scheduled for Thursday at 9 a.m. Please confirm." Lena stared at it. The world beyond Orion Air was calling. Geneva. A new opportunity. She had come here to fix a culture. She still believed in the possibility of change, but the clock was ticking. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and walked on. Her next stop was the diversity office. She would meet Tessa there soon, She needed a sounding board. She needed her friend's fierce honesty. But first, she had to shepherd this moment, move the machine of accreditation and accountability, turn policies into lived practice. She inhaled and stepped into the bright corridor. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows, casting patterns on the carpet. The work was hard. The stakes were high. But she was ready, because she understood that true inclusion couldn't wait for approval. It needed champions, people willing to stand in the gap and demand better. She was one of those people, and she would not step aside. The early afternoon sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the inclusion training room. Lena stood at the front, flip chart markers in hand, while the crew and staff gathered around. Chairs formed a semicircle. Sunlight glinted off badges and polished shoes. She surveyed the faces before her: Janelle, Troy, cabin supervisors, operations managers, and felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She opened the session by reminding everyone why they were here, not as a punishment, but as an opportunity. "We have two paths before us," she said, voice measured but urgent. "We can reassign this team to the Inclusion Ambassador Program, where they learn, grow, and mentor others, or we can remove them from service entirely." A ripple of tension moved through the group. Some faces tightened, others relaxed slightly, relieved at the prospect of change. Lena saw Janelle swallow hard and Troy shift in his seat. They had known this moment would come. She laid out the criteria. Reassignment requires active participation, genuine reflection, and demonstrable progress measured through feedback, assessments, and observation. Removal means immediate termination and a record of failure to engage. She paused, letting the gravity of that choice sink in. Caleb had warned her this morning that the board was watching. They wanted accountability, but Lena knew accountability that didn't allow for redemption only perpetuated the same cycles of exclusion. She believed in second chances, but only if they were earned. "Let's talk specifics," she continued. "Janelle and Troy, would you be willing to commit to 6 months in the ambassador program? That means co-leading workshops, attending every training session, and demonstrating changes in policy implementation." Janelle's hand went to her chest. "Yes," she said, voice trembling but steady. "I want to learn. I want to do better." Troy nodded beside her. "I'm in. I know I made mistakes. I want to fix them." Lena nodded, making notes. "We'll pair you with mentors from our diversity team. You'll lead role plays. You'll gather feedback from actual passengers. At the end of 6 months, we'll review progress and decide on next steps." She turned to the supervisors. "This isn't just about Janelle and Troy. It's about building a culture that holds everyone accountable. We're implementing monthly reflection circles where any crew member can raise concerns. And we're adding empathy checkpoints to our SOPs." An operations manager raised her hand. "What if someone refuses reassignment?" Lena looked directly at Janelle and Troy. Refusal equals removal. She let it hang there. No one liked ultimatums, but this was non-negotiable. A cabin manager spoke next. "Will this program be mandatory for all crew at some point?" "Yes," Lena replied. "We're piloting it now with Janelle and Troy. If successful, we'll roll it out to everyone. Inclusion isn't optional." She sensed some skepticism in the room. Some believed they were being painted with a broad brush. Others worried about morale. Lena addressed it head on. Morale improves when people feel safe and respected. Our crew deserves an environment where they're proud of our service. That requires a shared commitment. We're not punishing individuals. We're elevating standards. Silence fell. The group absorbed her words. The sunlight shifted, and the room felt warmer. Lena took a deep breath. Now. We need a volunteer to co-chair the Ambassador Program Committee. No one moved. She scanned the room. Then Nathan Clay stepped forward. I'll do it, he said. HR will support, but I'll take the lead. Lena smiled. Thank you. Nathan. She pointed at Janelle and Troy. You two will meet with Nathan tomorrow to finalize your schedule. A young inclusion consultant raised her hand. Dr. Moreau, will you be involved in these sessions? Lena paused. She had to think about her own bandwidth IMF interviews looming, crisis meetings with the board, restructuring flights to Asia on Caleb's watch. Yet she knew this project needed her voice at critical moments. Yes, she said. I'll attend key workshops. I'll lead one session each month to share real-world experiences. We'll invite passengers to speak. We'll hold listening sessions on flights. Heads nodded. The plan was taking shape. Crew members began to discuss logistics. Tessa Vaughn had joined virtually from her law firm to offer legal perspective. She chimed in with tips on how to weave compliance with human rights standards into the curriculum. Lena listened, grateful for her friend's unwavering support. Tessa's insights reminded her that this wasn't just corporate training. It was a moral imperative. People's lives were shaped by the respect or disrespect they experienced. After 90 minutes, the session ended. The room felt energized and exhausted at once. Lena thanked everyone and watched them file out. Talking in small groups, she lingered, gathering her notes. Nathan approached. They'll do it. They want to fix this. Lena nodded, relief mingling with doubt. I hope they prove genuine. Nathan glanced at her. They will. With you guiding them, they don't have a choice. She offered a tired smile. True. As the staff dispersed, Lena's phone buzzed again. Another calendar invite from Eric Liu, IMF final interview panel scheduled for Thursday at 9. She stared at it. She had built momentum here. She had made real change possible. But Geneva awaited. She tucked her phone away and stepped into the hallway. The hum of the office felt distant. Her mind raced with everything left to do, finalizing training modules, reviewing passenger feedback surveys, meeting with the board chairwoman Elaine Griggs. She headed down the hall to her office. Inside, she turned on the overhead lights. She set down her bag, powered up her laptop, and opened her inbox. Urgent messages from Caleb, HR, board members. She took a deep breath and began responding. Each keystroke felt like pushing a boulder up the hill, but she kept going. An hour later, Tessa walked in. Her sharp blazer and confident stride filled the room with energy. She closed the door behind her and leaned against the desk. I heard you led the meeting, Tessa said. How did it go? Lena leaned back in her chair. They're on board. It's happening. Tessa grinned. You did it. Lena shrugged. We did it. Everyone pulled together. Tessa's expression softened. And Geneva. Lena closed her eyes. I don't know. I want to be there. I've worked toward it for years. But this is important too. Tessa nodded slowly. You're standing in the gap. But you don't have to stand there forever. You can stand up somewhere else next month. Lena opened her eyes. Tessa's words cut through her dilemma. She had a choice to make. In 6 weeks, Lena said, I start in Geneva, but I'm responsible for these changes until then. Tessa crossed her arms. Then be responsible, and then go. You've earned it. They shared a quiet moment. Neither needed to say more. Tessa straightened. I'll help prep you for the panel if you need it. Lena smiled. I will. Tessa moved toward the door. Just don't forget to eat and sleep. Revolutionaries need rest, too. Lena laughed softly. I'll try. As the door closed, Lena sat at her desk. She gazed at the invitation on her screen. A fork in the road. She had chosen one path. Now she had to honor her commitment. 6 weeks of stewardship, then a new adventure. She typed a quick reply to Eric confirming the panel, then began drafting her presentation. The sun dipped lower. Evening lights twinkled in the windows. Lena leaned forward and pressed on. Her journey was far from over. Lena arrived home just after sunset. The living room lights cast a warm glow over the minimalist decor. She kicked off her heels and sank onto the sofa, exhaustion tacking at her limbs. The day's victories felt muted against the backdrop of the mountains of work still waiting training materials, feedback forms, board memos. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. She glanced at the screen. Eric Liu. She took a breath and answered, Good evening, Dr. Moreau. His calm voice greeted her. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all, she replied, smoothing the front of her blouse. I was just reviewing training outlines. He chuckled softly. I'm sure. You've been busy. I wanted to confirm that your final interview panel will convene tomorrow morning at 9 in our New York office. The location is in the calendar invite. She nodded even though he could not see her. I saw that. Thank you. I also wanted to reassure you that despite the current media attention on Orient Air, our selection committee views your professional accomplishments independent of anything else. We remain very interested in your candidacy. Lena exhaled slowly. She had worried that the news coverage would cast a shadow on her prospects. I appreciate that. I'm fully committed to the role and its responsibilities, and the timeline still works for you. Geneva within 6 weeks. Yes, she said without hesitation. I've communicated the transition plan with Dr. Clayton and the board. We will maintain momentum here while I prepare to relocate. Excellent. Eric's tone grew more conversational. Dr. Moreau, I must say, your leadership at Orion Air during this crisis has been most impressive. The decision to lead an inclusion ambassador program is innovative. The committee is excited by your approach to systemic change. Lena closed her eyes for a moment. She felt the familiar tug of pride and doubt. Thank you. It's necessary work. He hesitated. If I may ask, how do you feel about balancing 2 major roles in such rapid succession? The question landed softly, but with weight. She thought of the months of research and planning she had poured into her IMF proposal. She thought of the faces in today's training session. She thought of the narrow hallway at headquarters and the light glinting off her nameplate. I feel honored, she said slowly, and challenged. Leading cultural change at a major airline requires full attention. The IMF role demands strategic focus on economic development across multiple nations. Both require empathy, data analysis, and stakeholder engagement. I intend to give each role its due time and energy. That is reassuring, Eric replied. We will need your initial presence in Geneva for an intensive orientation program. It will cover everything from staff integration to country briefings, but we can accommodate flexible arrangements. A hybrid approach with remote check-ins is possible. Lena let that sink in. Hybrid work. A way to bridge the gap between 2 worlds. That could work, she said. Thank you. He offered further details on logistics and asked if she had any questions. She inquired about visa processing timelines, housing stipends, and support for her partner's transition if he chose to join her later. Eric provided clear answers and promised to send a detailed package by email. As the call ended, Lena sat quietly, absorbing the moment. She was on the cusp of a new chapter while still in the thick of one. She rose and walked to the window. The city lights twinkled below like fallen stars. Caleb entered the room, dressed down in jeans and a sweater. He had that look of someone who had just emerged from another long meeting. She turned to him and smiled, even though fatigue tugged at her eyes. "How was your day?" she asked. He crossed to her side and wrapped an arm around her shoulders. "Eventful," he said. "The board approved the ambassador program rollout. Elaine Griggs wants to meet with you Thursday. She's impressed." She leaned into him. "That's good news." He tilted her chin up and met her gaze. "What about you? I saw a call log from Eric." She nodded. "It's confirmed. Final interview in the morning. Then I'll start in Geneva in 6 weeks. His expression was a mix of pride and melancholy. 6 weeks feels too soon. She pressed her lips together. "I know. There's so much to do here, and I want to see the training through." He kissed her temple. "We'll make it work." She closed her eyes against the rush of emotion, gratitude, love, fear, excitement. She had long dreamed of this opportunity, but the timing tested her resolve. She stepped back and took his hands. "Thank you for believing in me." He smiled. "Always." They moved to the sofa together. Caleb pulled out his own laptop and opened an email about the Asian Expansion Initiative. Lena watched the glow of the screen reflect in his eyes. His world and hers were intertwined in ways both beautiful and complex. After a few moments, Lena's phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Janelle. "Thank you for today. I feel hopeful." She drafted a quick reply. "Proud of you. Keep going." Then she set the phone aside and leaned her head on Caleb's shoulder. The scope of what she had taken on pressed down on her, but she would not let it buckle her. She had cultivated resilience. She had built expertise. She had allies, and she had a vision. In the morning, she would face the IMF panel. She would draw on her academic rigor, her frontline experience, and her unwavering commitment to inclusion. She would speak with clarity about her work and her plan for Geneva, but tonight she allowed herself a moment of stillness. The hum of the city below and the warmth of home wrapped around her like a soft blanket. She closed her eyes and let herself feel the fullness of her life, both its demands and its possibilities. She felt the echo of flight attendants' apologies and the promise of new beginnings in unknown lands. Tomorrow would be another test, but she was ready, because wherever she flew, whether soaring above the clouds or stepping into a conference room in Geneva, she carried her own authority, her own integrity, and her own quiet strength. And no system, no stereotype, no policy gap could dim that light. Lena arrived at Tessa and Zach Vaughn's townhouse in Brooklyn, just as twilight settled over the city. The brownstone facade glowed warmly beneath the street lamp. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. Moments later, Tessa swept her into a hug. "I've missed you," Tessa said, voice low. Lena returned the embrace but felt the tension. She had turned down dinner with Caleb to meet Tessa here. Only a few hours ago she had promised to wrap up work, but when the prospect of Geneva loomed larger, she needed that lifeline. Inside. Zach greeted her with a polite smile. He held a bottle of red wine. "Good to see you. Lena?" She smiled. "Thanks for having me." They settled around the dining table. The Vaughns had prepared roasted chicken, seasonal vegetables, and a simple salad tossed with lemon vinaigrette. Candles flickered at the center. The air smelled of rosemary and garlic. It felt like sanctuary. Tessa poured 2 glasses of wine and slid one toward Lena. "Drink." Lena took a sip, letting the wine's warmth spread through her chest. "Yes, please." They ate in companionable silence for a while. Zach recounted a story about campus politics at the university, and Lena laughed, but the laughter felt strained. Beneath it, her mind raced back through the day, the inclusion session, the board meeting, Eric's call. The weight of decisions pressed on her. Finally, Tessa cleared her throat. "So, how are you holding up?" Lena set down her fork. "Exhausted, but proud of the progress we're making." Tessa's eyes sharpened. "Progress here, but Geneva still calls." "Right." Lena nodded. "I have the interview tomorrow. If I get it. I move in 6 weeks. Tessa leaned forward. "Have you talked to Caleb about it?" Her throat tightened. "Yes, but we didn't decide anything new." Tessa sighed. "He sounded excited last night. But are you sure this isn't just a detour from the airline crisis?" Lena bristled. "What do you mean?" Tessa tilted her head. "You've thrown yourself into saving Orion Air for weeks. Now you're about to leave. Doesn't that feel like avoidance?" Lena paused. Her mind flicked back to the training session. She had built momentum. She believed in the change. But her friend had a point. After all the apologies, the protocols, the ambassador program launching next week, she was ready to depart. "It's not avoidance," Lena said. "It's opportunity. I've worked toward this role for years." Tessa raised an eyebrow. "So you'll abandon the work here for your dream?" Lena's heart hammered. "I won't abandon it. I'll lead it until I leave, and the foundation will be in place." Tessa's expression grew guarded. "How do you know the foundation will hold?" Lena took a breath. "Because I've put safeguards in place. Nathan and the board are committed." Tessa shook her head. "Commitment can change overnight. Look at how that crew reacted. They only apologized under pressure." Lena's jaw clenched. "This isn't about crew members. It's about living systems. Systems can adapt." Tessa's tone sharpened. "Systems need champions, people who stay." Zach cleared his throat gently. "Tessa's right in part. Transitions can derail change." Lena's voice caught. "I understand that. But this offer from the IMF is my chance to shape economic policy for millions. I can't pass it up." Tessa set down her wineglass. "Is it that simple? Your career versus your responsibility to this airline?" Lena stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. The clatter startled both of them. She ran a hand through her hair. "You're not listening. I can do both." Tessa stood too. "You can't do both fully. Something will suffer." Lena's eyes burned. "So you think I'm selfish?" Tessa's posture softened, but her voice remained firm. "I think you're human, and human beings have limits." Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to say she was limitless, but she couldn't. The weeks ahead would stretch her thin. She felt torn to pieces inside. Zach moved closer. "Maybe we're not mad at you. Maybe we're mad for you." Lena swallowed. "You think I don't know?" That Tessa's eyes softened. "We want you to have everything you deserve, but we fear you'll lose yourself." Silence fell. Lena looked at the table, where candle wax had pooled into small rivers. She thought of the candlelight cabin and the hush that had followed her apology announcement. She thought of Caleb waiting at home, the train of work never ending. She sat down again. Her legs trembled. She covered her face with her hands, exhaling slowly. When she looked up, her eyes were red. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I don't want to fail here, and I don't want to regret leaving." Tessa reached across and squeezed her hand. "You won't fail here, and you won't regret there, if you choose that path on your terms." Lena nodded. The words felt like a balm. She drew strength from her friend's conviction. Zach poured a little more wine for both of them. Tessa reached for the chicken and placed a piece on Lena's plate. Eat something. You need fuel for all this thinking. Lena picked up her fork and took a bite. It tasted of home and compromise. It tasted like choices and consequences. They ate slowly, each lost in thought. The soft glow of the candle flickered over their faces. Lena realized that this fight, this dinner table fight, was as vital as any boardroom battle. Here, she confronted her own fears. Here, she tested her resolve. Tessa set down her wineglass again and looked at Lena. Whatever you decide, you have our support. Lena held her gaze. Thank you. That means everything. Zach nodded. We'll always be in your corner. Lena felt a lump in her throat. She finished the chicken, savoring the texture and warmth. She realized that the next move was hers alone. She would carry the love and worry of these friends as she stepped into the challenges ahead. Dishes were cleared, and Zach filled a pot with water for coffee. The three of them moved to the living room, where soft sofas invited reflection. Lena sank onto one. She closed her eyes and let the support wrap around her. After a moment, she spoke. I am going to do this. I will stay with the ambassador program until I leave. Then I will go to Geneva with my head held high. Tessa and Zach smiled, relief and pride shining in their eyes. Tessa reached out. To your next chapter. They linked pinkies in a playful toast. Lena opened her eyes. She felt tears threaten, but held them back. She felt both fear and exhilaration. The road ahead was daunting, but her path was clear. She had fought for respect on a flight. She would now fight for systemic change in an airline and eventually on a global scale. And through it all, she would carry the voices of those who believed in her. The candle burned low on the coffee table. Outside, the city lights continued their endless glow. Lena closed her eyes and breathed deeply. She was ready. Lena woke before dawn, the sky still dark beyond the bedroom curtains. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. She reached for it groggily and saw multiple missed calls from Caleb, Tessa, and Elaine Griggs. She opened her news app. The headline hit her like a tidal wave. Orion Air CEO faces class action after internal crisis. Beneath it, a subheader read anonymous sources allege systemic bias and wage discrepancies. Her chest tightened. She scrolled. Tweets accused the airline of hypocrisy. A Business Journal article quoted unnamed former employees claiming pay disparities. Another tweet labeled Caleb Maro a puppet of privilege. Comments piled up faster than she could read. She called Caleb back immediately. He answered on the second ring, voice tight. They've leaked internal discussions. Emails from the ambassador program reveal that some employees felt forced into unrealistic training quotas. They allege retaliation. Lena swung her legs over the side of the bed and sat up. Who leaked it? He sighed. We don't know yet. The board is in turmoil. Investors are nervous. The legal team is scrambling. I'm heading to the office now. I'm on my way, she said. She threw on a sweater and jeans, skipped breakfast, and joined Caleb's car 10 minutes later. The streets were quiet. They drove in silence, apart from the low hum of the engine. Outside Orion Air headquarters, media vans lined the curb. Reporters clustered around the entrance. Security guards held them back. Lena braced herself and stepped out beside Caleb. Flashing lights greeted her, microphones thrust forward. A reporter shouted, Dr. Moreau, can you comment on the wage discrimination claims? Another asked, will you resign from the ambassador program? Cameras rolled. Caleb placed a protective hand on her back. He turned to the crowd. We are investigating these allegations. All employees will be heard. We remain committed to transparency. Lena followed him through the glass doors. Inside the lobby, the energy was electric. Employees in business attire stared as they passed. Some offered sympathetic nods. Others avoided eye contact. Nathan Clay approached them, face pale. "Elaine wants you both in the boardroom. Now." They rode the elevator to the top floor. The doors opened onto a tense scene. Board members sat around the table. Elaine Griggs stood at the head, arms crossed. She motioned for them to sit. Elaine's eyes were sharp. She didn't waste time. "We have a crisis. The leak has exposed raw grievances. Our legal exposure is enormous. Share prices are plummeting. I need to know how this happened and how we stop it." Caleb spoke first. "We believe someone inside leaked selective emails to discredit us. The allegations of wage gaps may have basis in data, but the narrative is skewed." Elaine nodded. "Dr. Moreau, you led the ambassador program. You have access to those communications. What can you tell us?" Lena took a deep breath. She laid out the facts. The program's confidential channels were restricted. Only participants and their mentors had access. All communications were logged. She had asked IT to run preliminary audits overnight. "I confirm an unauthorized access occurred." She said, "Someone used a high-level credential to extract emails." The excerpted messages were then selectively released. They were edited to exaggerate process failures and presented as proof of systemic retaliation. Elaine's expression darkened. "Do you know who Lena exchanged a glance with Nathan?" "We have a short list. Access logs point to 3 senior executives. We are investigating further." Elaine nodded curtly. "Find the culprit. This leak is an act of sabotage. We must protect the integrity of the program and the company," Caleb added. "This leak underscores the very issues we are trying to fix. It reveals internal resistance to change." Elaine raised an eyebrow. "Resistance or retaliation?" Lena spoke, "Possibly both. But it also demonstrates the need for our ambassador program. We are exposing uncomfortable truths. Some will fight back." The board fell silent. Elaine tapped the table. "Proceed. We need a full report by end of day. And Dr. Moreau, you will host a town hall for employees this afternoon. Address the allegations directly. Show them our commitment to accountability." Lena nodded. "I will." They left the boardroom. In the hallway, Tessa awaited them. She approached Lena and hugged her quickly. "I'm here," she whispered. Lena smiled gratefully and turned to Caleb. He caught her gaze and squeezed her hand. They headed to the auditorium where employees had gathered on short notice. The room was packed. Some held phones. Some wore anxious expressions. The air thrummed with anticipation. Lena stepped onto the small stage beside Caleb and Nathan. A microphone awaited her. She looked out at the crowd: flight attendants, ground staff, pilots, office workers, all brought together by crisis. She tapped the mic. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. I know many of you are upset, confused, or angry. I am too." This week began with a single incident in a first-class cabin. It has grown into a company-wide reckoning. We have seen both our best intentions and our worst biases laid bare. She paused. The room was silent. We launched the ambassador program to address patterns of exclusion and to create spaces for honest dialogue. Unfortunately, someone inside abused the confidentiality of that program to create a false narrative of retaliation. The emails you may have seen were edited and leaked maliciously. Murmurs rippled. She raised a hand. "Hear me out. We are investigating the breach. We will hold the saboteur accountable. But we will not abandon the core purpose. We will continue this work because it is vital to who we are as a company and as individuals. She glanced at Nathan, who projected the true access logs on the screen behind them. Lines of code, timestamps, revealed anomalies. The crowd leaned forward. Let's be clear, Lena continued. This leak did not create the need for change. It exposed resistance to change. We will support those who want to grow. We will challenge those who resist, and we will do so transparently. I ask for your trust as we navigate this. A hand went up at the back. A young ground staff member. Lena pointed to her. Yes, you're saying you want us to trust the same system that just betrayed us, the woman asked. Lena nodded. I understand your skepticism, but I am here to rebuild that trust. Today, we will establish an anonymous hotline. You can report any concerns without fear. We will act on every credible report. The woman nodded slowly. Others shifted in their seats. Caleb stepped forward. I am sorry for the harm this crisis has caused you. I am committed to accountability at every level. We will learn from this, adapt, and emerge stronger. He returned to Lena. She took a breath. She felt the weight of her words. She felt the fragile hope in the room. After the meeting, employees lingered to ask questions, share concerns, and offer support. Lena and Nathan stayed until the room emptied. Outside, the sun was low. The sky turned pink. Caleb found Lena in the lobby. How did it feel? He asked. It felt real. She replied, messy and real. He kissed her temple. You were honest. She nodded. That's all I can be. They walked to the elevator. Lena's phone buzzed again. A text from IT pinpointed unauthorized access. Username confirmed. The saboteur was identified. She exhaled. The fight was far from over, but they had turned a leak into a moment of collective clarity. A reckoning had begun. She held Caleb's hand as the doors closed. She was tired, but resolute. Tomorrow she would meet with IT and legal. Tomorrow she would prepare for Geneva. But tonight she had faced the leak, the exposure, and emerged with her compass intact. Because in the crucible of crisis, she had spoken truth, and truth was powerful. Lena entered the boardroom early, the morning light filtering through the panoramic windows. The city sprawled below, indifferent to the turmoil inside these walls. She carried a single folder with the finalized audit report and a tablet displaying the IT breach analysis. Her heart pounded. Today's meeting would determine her path whether to stay or to leave. Caleb arrived seconds later, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up. His presence was steady. They exchanged a brief look. No words were needed. They stepped to the table together. Elaine Griggs, chairwoman of the board, sat at the head. Her sharp gaze flicked to both of them. Around the table, key executives and board members took their seats. A low murmur rose as they gathered the documents in front of them. Elaine raised a hand. Silence fell. Dr. Moreau, she said, voice measured. Thank you for joining us. We have received your report on the ambassador program and the IT breach. We also have the operational impact data. Let us begin. Lena seated herself and opened the folder. She tapped the tablet. The screen displayed a timeline of the unauthorized access, pinpointing it to a senior manager's credentials. She looked up. The breach was executed by James Winters, our chief technology officer. She announced, he accessed confidential channels repeatedly, extracted emails, and facilitated their selective leak. A stir rose. Whispers fluttered across the table. Elaine nodded. Go on, Lena continued. James claimed he acted from a sense of injustice over his career stagnation. but his methods endangered our progress and exposed personal data. Legal counsel recommends immediate termination and pursuing legal action. Caleb chimed in. I support that recommendation. Elaine turned to Caleb. Mr. Moreau, are you prepared to remove a key founder from the company? He met her gaze. Yes. He betrayed our trust and our values. Elaine nodded. She scribbled on a notepad. So it shall be. Dr. Moreau, have you updated the ambassador program timeline given this development? Lena nodded. Yes. We will expand the program to include updated security protocols and an ethics module. We will begin Phase 2 next week with all senior leadership. Additionally, we will enhance data privacy measures for all internal communications. A board member spoke up. What about timing? You will leave for Geneva soon. Who will oversee these changes? Lena paused. This was the moment she had anticipated. The room held its breath. I propose a transition period of 4 weeks, she said finally. During that time, I will oversee the implementation of Phase 2 in person. After that, I will hand over to a dedicated Chief Diversity Officer who will report directly to the CEO. I will remain available remotely for consultation. She looked at Caleb. It aligns with my IMF start date and ensures continuity. Elaine considered this. A 4-week extension of your interim role, then remote oversight. Does the IMF agree to this arrangement? Caleb reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He showed a recent text from Eric confirming flexibility for remote work. Elaine examined the text and placed it on the table. I am satisfied, she said. Board members. Any objections? Silence. One by one, they shook their heads. Elaine smiled slightly. Then it is settled. Dr. Moreau will extend her leadership of the program for 4 weeks. We will terminate Mr. Winters effective immediately. We will also announce the new Chief Diversity Officer next week. Lena exhaled. Relief mingled with sorrow. James had been a colleague, once a friend, but trust was broken. Elaine continued, Dr. Moreau, we are grateful for your dedication. Your work has already reshaped our culture in meaningful ways. Lena nodded. Thank you. I am honored to have had this opportunity. The meeting concluded. Board members filed out, offering congratulations and handshakes. Lena remained seated briefly, collecting her thoughts. Caleb sat beside her. You did it, he said softly. She closed the folder. We did it. Together? He kissed her temple. Ready for Geneva after that? She smiled. I think so. Later that day, Lena walked through the terminal once more, this time as an observer rather than a passenger. She noted how ground staff assisted travelers with care, how signage in the cabin now clearly marked first class without ambiguity, how the new security badge system required visual confirmation beyond digital scans. She boarded Flight 991 for a short trip to London to meet with potential IMF contacts in the European office. As she settled into her seat, she noticed the crew greeting her with respectful warmth. Some remembered her from just weeks ago. Others simply smiled as they would any valued passenger. During takeoff, she closed her eyes and reflected on the journey. She had faced microaggressions in that very cabin, turned them into policy, expanded that policy into culture, and now saw its tangible benefits. One moment from a few weeks ago replayed Janelle crying behind the curtain of the cabin door, apologizing. Lena had accepted that apology, but required more than words. Now, those powerful moments seemed to ripple outward through every layer of the organization. The plane leveled off. Lena opened her laptop. She drafted an email to Nathan Clay with the updated transition plan. She copied Eric Liu, confirming her remote availability for IMF planning. She paused over the send button. She thought of James Winters and the betrayal. She would watch from afar as legal action unfolded. It would be painful, but necessary. Trust required accountability. She thought of Tessa's words, stand in the gap for as long as needed and then stand up elsewhere. She realized she had filled the gap. She had realigned an entire corporation. Now it was time to stand up on a broader stage. She pressed send. A flight attendant appeared offering refreshments. Lena chose tea. The warm cup in her hands felt like comfort. She sipped slowly, savoring the moment. Around her, the cabin carried on with its quiet luxury. Travelers read, worked, slept. The world moved forward above the clouds. She exhaled. The sky stretched infinitely beyond the window. Her path was clear. 4 more weeks of stewardship. Then Geneva. More challenges. More opportunity. She leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment of rest. Then she opened her laptop again. A blank document greeted her, a keynote for her IMF orientation. She began to type. Her words felt grounded in experience and hope. She shared data, stories from the cabin, strategies for systemic change, and a vision for inclusive economic development. As the flight approached cruising altitude, Lena felt a quiet confidence settle in. She had navigated prejudice, corporate sabotage, marital tensions, and personal doubt. She had grown stronger with each test. Now, the horizon beckoned. Her journey was far from over. Lena sat by the window seat as Flight 991 descended toward Geneva. The Alps rose into view, their snow-capped peaks glowing in the late afternoon sun. The engines hummed steadily beneath her, a comforting rhythm after weeks of turbulence. She closed her eyes and let the moment wash over her. She had left Orion Air behind well, not behind exactly, but in capable hands. The ambassador program was fully staffed, security protocols were locked down, and the new chief diversity officer was preparing to onboard next week. The board had praised her leadership, the crew had embraced their new roles, and the employees had rallied behind accountability. She had honored her commitment, fulfilled her purpose, and now she was ready for the next chapter. Her phone vibrated. She opened the message from Kaylee Bland soon. "Now call you in 15. Hearts." She smiled, tapped a quick reply, and slipped the device back into her bag. The flight attendant knelt beside her seat. "Dr. Moreau, welcome to Geneva. I hope you had a pleasant flight." Lena offered a warm smile. "Thank you. It was very smooth. Immigration is to the left. Your luggage is priority tagged. If you need assistance, please let me know." "Thank you," Lena said again, appreciating the professional courtesy. Once her advocate, always her advocate. The attendant moved on. Lena felt a mixture of excitement and calm. She pressed the call button for a glass of water, then used that pause to review her briefing notes. She had a half-hour to prepare before her first official meeting at the IMF's European headquarters. Her mind flicked through the days since Flight 918. The initial indignity at the gate, Caleb's intervention, the corporate summit, the ambassador program launch, the leak and the town hall, the boardroom showdown. Each step had tested her resolve, but each step had also solidified her convictions. She realized that the flight crew's mistake had been a catalyst, one that revealed deeper fractures and demanded system-level solutions. The seatbelt sign dinged off as they taxied to the gate. Lena gathered her things, slipping her laptop into a slim case. She took one more look at the Alps outside the window and whispered, "Here's to new beginnings." Through immigration and customs, she moved efficiently. Her priority luggage appeared moments later. She followed the signs to the Geneva Transport Center and hailed a taxi. The driver greeted her in French, and she replied in practiced French, surprising him with her accent. The car pulled away, cutting through the center of Geneva. The jet d'eau fountain sprayed water high into the sky. Old stone buildings gave way to modern glass facades. The route felt symbolic, bridging history and innovation, tradition and progress, just as her own journey had bridged two worlds. She arrived at the IMF office, an imposing building with marble floors and lofty ceilings. Security checked her badge and motioned her through. Inside, there was a sense of calm purpose. Employees moved with quiet confidence. Conversations in multiple languages prospered in open-plan lounges. The air smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. Eric Liu met her at the entrance. His warm smile was genuine. "Dr. Moreau, welcome to Geneva," he said. "We are honored to have you." "Thank you." "Eric," she replied, extending her hand. "It's good to be here." He shook her hand and led her down the hall. "Your office is ready. I've also scheduled meet and greets with key country directors this afternoon." They reached a glass-walled suite overlooking the city. A large desk, ergonomic chair, and an array of digital screens awaited her. Eric pointed out a framed map of sub-Saharan Africa on the wall. "This will be your canvas," he said. "Your team is eager to get started." Lena touched the map lightly. It felt both real and aspirational. She thought of the crises she would face here: inequality, debt, infrastructure, climate shock. But she felt prepared. She carried the lessons of first-class bias into these halls: inclusion, accountability, transparency principles that transcended industries. Eric left her to settle in. She arranged her laptop, opened her files, and reviewed her notes. She drafted an email to the country directors, outlining her vision: integrate local voices into policy design, implement data-driven equity assessments, and establish community advisory panels. A knock sounded on the glass door. It was Jean-Pierre Dupont, her deputy for African initiatives. "Dr. Moreau," he said, offering a courteous nod, "I've brought the preliminary budget proposals for your review." "Thank you, Jean-Pierre," she said, standing to take the documents. "Let's go over them." They sat and began discussing allocations: rural electrification, microfinance, sustainable agriculture. Lena's mind thrummed with ideas how to adapt best practices from corporate diversity programs to global economic systems. She proposed a pilot project in Ghana partner with local cooperatives to finance solar installations in farming communities. Jean-Pierre nodded approvingly. "I like that," he said. "It aligns with our climate resilience goals and our mandate to reduce poverty." Lena smiled. "Let's flesh it out for next week's board meeting." Boîte, mes citoyens. 3 hours later, they emerged from the meeting and made their way to the cafeteria. Lena picked at a salad, while Jean-Pierre went for coffee. She looked around at the diverse staff: economists, policy analysts, communications specialists. Everyone seemed focused, yet approachable. She felt at home already. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb: "Proud of you. Love you." She felt tears prick her eyes. She tapped a reply. "Thank you. See you soon." Jean-Pierre returned and sat across from her. "He's a good man," he said. Noticing her gaze at the screen, "He is," Lena replied softly. "I couldn't have done any of this without him." He smiled. "Balance is key. You've brought that wisdom here already." She paused, thinking of Tessa's words about limits. She realized that while she still carried responsibility for Orion's transformation in those final weeks, her role here demanded a broader vision: She had to be both advocate and architect, diplomat and strategist. She stood. "Shall we continue?" He nodded. "Of course." They spent the rest of the afternoon mapping out timelines, drafting policy briefs, and assigning responsibilities. Lena found the work invigorating. She loved the challenge of aligning diverse perspectives into cohesive strategies. She loved the sense of collective purpose. That evening, she returned to her temporary apartment overlooking Lake Geneva. Lights twinkled on the water. She prepared a simple dinner, grilled vegetables and fish, while scanning messages from colleagues back home. Nathan's update reported the Ambassador Program's Phase 2 kickoff. Janelle and Troy had led their first workshop. No major incidents. She allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The ripple effect of her work at Orion had begun to spread. Inclusion was no longer abstract. It was taking root. She set her plate aside and opened her journal. She wrote "First day in Geneva," felt welcomed and empowered. The bridge from airline culture to global economics is stronger than I imagined. Still mindful of the commitments I left behind. Tonight I celebrate being here and look forward to making real impact. She closed the journal and set it on the desk. Then she called Caleb. They spoke for a few minutes, sharing small moments his day at the office, her walk along the lake, dinner plans together. The call ended with laughter and love. Lena sank onto the sofa, exhausted but content. She gazed out at the city lights, her reflection merging with the scene beyond. She felt the full arc of her journey from contested seat in a first-class cabin to this vantage point overlooking an international vista. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you for every challenge, every slight, every boardroom battle, and every personal sacrifice, for the strength to stand firm and the willingness to step aside when the moment was right, for the courage to change systems and the grace to embrace new horizons." Tomorrow she would rise before dawn, ready to champion economic justice on a global scale. But tonight she rested in the promise of what was possible when respect and opportunity converged. The Alps stood silent guard outside her window. The lake shimmered like mercury. She exhaled, letting the world settle around her. Her journey had been long and tumultuous, but the final descent into a new mission felt like home. Dr. Lena Moreau's journey reminds us that true respect cannot be swiped away by a boarding pass or buried in corporate boardrooms. We watched an act of prejudice spark an unstoppable drive for inclusion and accountability. We cheered her triumphs and felt the weight of her sacrifice. Above all, we stand against discrimination in every cabin, classroom, and corner office. If this story moved you, show your support by liking, sharing, and subscribing. Stay tuned for more powerful tales that challenge injustice, celebrate resilience, and inspire us all to lift each other higher. Your next voyage of discovery begins here. See you on the next flight. Hoy ChatGPT.